All right, everybody. Welcome to the Writing Center Workshop APA Style. A little bit about me. I'm Misty. I run the Writing Center, so if you ever communicate with us, you're usually talking to me. This is a GPS workshop, which means you can get a GPS point. You have to be here for the whole session. You have to fill out a professional development survey at the end of our workshop, which I will provide a link to in the chat box when we get there. And you have 1 hour after the workshop ends to complete the survey. If you submit your survey after that 1 hour has ended, it will not count and you won't get your GPS point. So that's a little bit about GPS. We're going to go right into APA style now. APA style. We're going to talk about how APA relates to other citation styles you may have used in the past. We're going to talk about why we cite sources and how we cite sources, basic formatting requirements of APA, the link between in-text citations and the reference list, and how to effectively approach and use APA style in a paper. So that's a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right in and get started. What is APA style? You may have used APA before, but if you haven't, APA stands for the American Psychological Association. APA style rules were created by the American Psychological Association, and they can be found in an APA manual. The manual provides guidelines for writing as well as proper documentation of sources. The first APA manual was published in 1952, and they put out a new manual every couple of years. We currently follow the 6th edition. Why do we use APA style at Full Sail? It's a good question, and it's one that we get asked a lot, and it's because you may have used other documentation styles in the past. MLA or Chicago or AP are all other ones. In your high school English class, you probably used MLA. So why is it different at Full Sail? We use APA style at Full Sail because it's the accepted citation style for businesses, and it accommodates the wide range of disciplines studied here. Students here study multiple fields, all in the entertainment business, and so this is what you'd most likely be seeing or using once you leave Full Sail. You'll be required to use APA style for every research assignment that requires citation throughout your education. So every class here at Full Sail has at least one assignment that requires library research. So all your course instructors who ask you to cite your sources expect you to use APA. Because APA is a school-wide approach, it makes sense to learn it early. Now we're going to talk about why we cite sources. There are a few reasons that we do this. When we cite sources, our readers are able to distinguish between our ideas and information taken from outside sources. That means that we as writers get credit for our own ideas and give appropriate credit to the ideas of others. When a paper lacks citations, readers assume that all of the ideas belong to the writer. If ideas in the paper belong to an outside source and have not been properly cited, this may be considered plagiarism. When we cite sources, we also show that we've taken the time to study and understand the research and documentation process. This brings credibility to your paper and to your own ideas. Any information that comes from an outside source needs to be cited. This includes quotes, paraphrases, summaries, images, audio, video, game elements, computer software, and other media. So let's talk a little bit about what these quotes and paraphrases and summaries are. A quote is a word-for-word passage from an outside source. You must cite all of your quotes used in a paper. A paraphrase is when you take a fact or idea from an outside source and put it into your own words. You also have to cite all paraphrases used in your paper. Summaries. When you summarize, you put the main idea of a piece of writing into your own words. This differs from a paraphrase, where you put a specific idea or a fact from a piece of writing into your own words. Think of summaries as the whole main point of an article. You might be summarizing it for someone. And a paraphrase is when you take one very small specific piece of information and change it for the people, explain it to your readers. All right, what about audio, video, images, and other media? Guess what? You have to cite those as well. There are two different ways to cite media. One citation style you use when you discuss media in a paper, and another citation style you use when you include media in a presentation. We're going to talk about both of those in just a few minutes. What does not need to be cited? We don't need to cite common knowledge, but we do need to understand what common knowledge is. So ideas that are available in a variety of sources, generally accepted facts, such as pollution is bad for the environment or writing is a process, don't need to be cited. However, you can usually, if you're still confused about common knowledge, you can usually determine that something is common knowledge if you can find the same information undocumented or uncited in at least 5 credible sources. It's important to note that just because you memorize a fact from an article, the fact is not considered common knowledge. You still have to cite the article. I like to think about it like this. If you are doing research on a specific topic, you might come across 5 different articles that all cite the same Pew Research survey. That doesn't mean that it's common knowledge. Each of those articles cited the survey, which means you need to cite the survey as well, or you need to cite the article that you found the survey in. Some other things that don't need to be cited include findings from preliminary experimentation. This is just a fancy way to say experiments you conduct yourself, or original audio, video, and images that you have created. A note on this, it can sometimes be really, really helpful if you ask your, if you say that it's your own work, just so your professor or your instructor or your audience doesn't look at it and think that you forgot to cite it. When in doubt, cite the ideas using APA style. It's always better to be safe than to be sorry. All right, in this next section, we're going to get down to kind of the bare bones of APA style and talk about some of the formatting requirements. There are 3 major elements of an APA paper. You have your title page, your in-text citations, and your reference list entry. There are other elements that are not always needed, like the abstract. So let's talk about the title page. This is what your title page should look like. In just 1 second, I'm going to share a YouTube link with you guys that you can, if you're not sure how to format your title page, it takes you through the steps that you need. It's a little, I'm not going to walk you through that process because it's a little bit long. And also, you probably won't remember it when you actually need to use it. So I'll give you the link that you can bookmark and then go through. Actually, I'll do that right now. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is the YouTube link. I'm going to put it in our chat box. And that will walk you through the steps. I'm seeing a couple questions pop up in the chat box. Remember these for later. It will be a little bit faster. I will answer them all at the end. They're all good questions. I'm not ignoring you guys. Okay, so let's look at the title page. Your title page needs a header. The words running head, you'll see that flushed left, followed by a colon, and then the title of your paper in all caps. The page number appears flush right in the header. You'll have a different header on your title page than you do on the rest of your document. On the rest of the document, you'll drop the words running head and the colon and just put the title of the paper in all caps. Centered about halfway down the page, you put the title of your paper, then your name, and finally the name of your school. Okay, someone asked about the abstract, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. You may or may not be required to have an abstract in your paper. The best thing to do if you're concerned about whether you should have one or not is to just ask your instructor. Abstracts are usually only included with longer research papers, such as a thesis paper, but every once in a while you'll have an assignment where your instructor wants you to include one. I would just double check with them. When required, the abstract is a brief summary of your paper that immediately follows the title page. The abstract should be double-spaced, and it should include the page header with the title of the paper in all caps, flush left, and the page number flush right. The word abstract should be centered. You don't want to bold it or use italics, underlining, or quotation marks. The abstract is about 150 to 250 words. This can vary based on the assignment requirements. Sometimes you will want to include keywords in your abstract. You don't have to. If you do include keywords, indent as you would if you were starting a new paragraph, then type keywords in italics, followed by a colon, and then the keywords that you actually need people to look for in your paper. All right, the next two important parts of the APA paper are in-text citations and the reference list. APA style calls for both. You can't have one without the other, kind of like milk and cookies or carrots and peas or any other thing that you like to eat. I don't know, like pork chops and applesauce. They go together. In-text citations are used in the body of the document. An in-text citation specifies which source a particular piece of information, like a quote or a paraphrase or a summary or an image, is from. The reference list appears at the end of the document and gives detailed publication information about each source cited in the document. This allows someone to actually go and find the resources that you used to write your paper. If we didn't have in-text citations, we wouldn't be able to identify which ideas in a paper came from an outside source and which ideas came from the author. And if we didn't have the reference list, we wouldn't be able to find the references used throughout the paper. Again, in APA style, you need both. In the next few slides, I'm going to be going through a lot of specific details about formatting for in-text citations and reference lists. Don't feel like you have to memorize everything. It's a lot of information, and a little bit later on in the presentation, I'll show you some resources where you can find the same info when you need it. And that's something really important to remember about APA style. There's so much information, you're never going to be able to memorize it all. But what you do need to know is the basics, so you know what you need. And then you also need to know where to find the resources and find how to actually quote things properly, which is what we do in this workshop. All right, let's talk about in-text citations first. What should the in-text citation look like? The format for in-text citations can vary depending on whether the information cited is a quotation, summary, or paraphrase. There are two basic formats for in-text citations, whether you're citing a quote, a summary, or a paraphrase. So the first example, a quote from a Writing Center blog post, is according to Chapman, when you quote a source, you use a word-for-word passage from the source in your paper. Para 4. So we've used the author's last name in the sentence after according to. We've put the date in the parentheses immediately after the author's name and the page number in parentheses at the end of the sentence. In this case, we don't have a page number because it's an online blog, so we've used the paragraph number instead. And that's actually something that very few blogs actually put paragraph numbers on their paragraphs. You'd have to do that yourself. When we put the author's name in the sentence like this, it's called a signal phrase. In the second example, we have not used a signal phrase. Instead, we put the author's last name, the year, and page number or paragraph number at the end of the quote. Either format is acceptable. One of the reasons that you might want to do the signal phrase is it just embeds the quote a little more easily into your paper, but that's subjective. Some of the time you'll want to use one, some of the time you'll want to use the other way of doing the in-text citations. Okay, so Let's take a closer look at the format for citing quotes. In APA style, there are two different formats, one format for quotes under 40 words and another format for quotes over 40 words. The example that we're looking at right now is a quote that is under 40 words. And since it's under 40 words, you need quotation marks surrounding the actual quote, the author's last name, year, and page number, and a period appears at the very end of the citation. If the quote is more than 40 words, it should look like this example. Notice, we must use a signal phrase. In this case, Chapman, 2012, states, followed by a colon. We do not need quotation marks, but the quote, it's a little bit hard to see on this example, but the quote is actually indented and starts on a new line. And it's a block indent, which means all of that quote will be indented over like it's a new paragraph. And here is a strange APA rule. In this format and only this format, the period appears at the end of the sentence that you're quoting rather than at the end of the citation. Also, we haven't done it here, but if you omit words, phrases, or sentences within a quote, be sure to use ellipses, which are those three dots, the three periods following each other. That signals to your readers that you've removed something from the quote. When you remove something from the quote, you must be positive that you haven't changed the meaning of the quote. All right, we've looked at quotes. Now let's look at paraphrases. In this example, we're citing a paraphrase. We used an idea from the article we're citing, but we didn't use a word-for-word quote. We put the idea into our own words. We still need to include the author's last name as well as the year of publication, but with paraphrases, it's not necessary to cite the page number. You also don't use quotes, obviously, because it's not a quote. Now we're going to look at the summary. Like with a paraphrase, we still need to cite the author's last name and the year of publication, but not the page number. It's not necessarily incorrect to include the page number, you just don't need it. And as you can see, the difference between the summary and the paraphrase here is the paraphrase is looking at a very specific fact within the argument that she's making in the blog, and then the summary is summing up the entire point of the blog post. All right, sometimes we encounter tricky in-text citations. They don't include the information we need to create an in-text citation like the author's name, date, or page number. So how do we handle these sources? If there's no author listed, you'd use the first few relevant words in the title of the article or book in place of the author's last name. The title should be in quotation marks, and this is an example of how it will look. If there's no specific author listed, but the information comes from an organization or company's document or website, you can use the organization's name instead of the author's name. So, for example, a study by the Food and Drug Administration might not list who actually wrote that study, but you would use Food and Drug Administration. Or if you were looking at quarterly earnings for a company like AT&T, it's probably not going to have whoever put that information together, so you would just say AT&T. So use the organization or name of the company instead of an author's name. If no date is listed, you have to use the abbreviation ND, which stands for no date. And sometimes when we're quoting online resources especially, page numbers are not available. So if we're citing a quotation, we should cite the paragraph number where we found the quote. So for example, if the quote was in the second paragraph, we would cite para 2. If we're citing a paraphrase or a summary, we don't need the page number, so we don't need to include anything. All right, let's talk about the reference list, which is our third major element of an APA paper. We'll start by looking at formatting requirements. Every page in your APA style paper needs a header. So the header should look like the rest of the headers in the paper with the exception of the title page header. So the title of your paper in all caps, flush left, and the page number flush right. References should be centered at the top of the page. It should not be in bold, italics, or underlined. And then as far as the sources go, they should be listed alphabetically by author's last name or by organization. If an author has more than one work, organized by date of publication. The reference list should be double spaced with no extra spaces between sources. Every line after the first line of each entry should be indented. This is called a hanging indent. I'm going to post in the chat box again a quick YouTube video that you guys can bookmark and watch that explains how to do this so that your formatting works correctly. So that's just a little bit about the formatting for that. And then, electronic sources should include clickable URLs. Meaning you can, if someone was reading your paper online, they could actually click that and it would take them to the site that you found it. All right, let's take a closer look at reference list entries. The first step in deciding how to cite a source is to decide what type of source you have. Is your source a book, a magazine, a newspaper article, journal, website, personal interview, YouTube video, or is it another type of print or electronic source? APA has specific rules for citing different kinds of sources. Each entry, regardless of the type of source, will contain the author's name if it's known, the title of the work, publication information, but this information changes, it varies depending on the source. It's important to identify the type of source you have and then look for the example of how to cite that particular source. For this example, we're looking at a reference entry for a blog. However, if we were citing a book or an online newspaper or a video game, the citation would have a different format. So let's notice that we list the author by last name and first initial of first name. In this example, we have a single author, but your source may have multiple authors, no author, or an organization as an author. The date in parentheses comes after the author. In this case, we're citing a blog, so we need the complete date, including the year, month, and day. For some other types of entries, you only need the year. Again, you want to be sure to check for examples for your specific type of source. Notice that only the first letter of the first word in the book or article title is capitalized. Every word that comes after the first word begins with a lowercase letter. The exception to that rule is proper nouns. They're always capitalized. And if you have a colon, the word following that colon will have a capital letter as well. Notice that each line after the first line of the entry is indented. That's the hanging indent that we were just talking about. And for a blog citation, we have to note whether this is a web blog or a blog comment. That's in the brackets. The web log is the longhand for blog. And for any electronic source, we need a URL. The words retrieved from are followed by the permalink to the source. All right, so we've talked about a basic reference list entry, but what if we don't know the author's name or the date of publication? For this example, let's pretend that the article we just referenced has no author listed. Notice that the title of the article moves to the front of the citation in place of the author's last name. And then the rest of the information remains the same. Again, we're going to pretend that the article we just referenced has no author listed, but we know that an organization, the Full Sail Writing Center, published the article. The name of the organization goes in place of author's last name. All right, let's pretend for this example that the article has no date listed. Just like with the in-text citation, we use the abbreviation no date, or ND for no date. So far, we've talked about how to cite ideas used in a paper. What if you need to cite media used in a paper? For example, let's say we're in a photography class. Our instructor asked us to find a photograph online and discuss its composition. We aren't including the image in the paper, just referring to it. How do we cite that? If you're referring to a specific piece of media in your paper, then you need to cite it in APA style using both the in-text citation and the reference list. This is the sample citation for an image. You also need to cite other media like videos, music, computer games, video games, movies, TV shows, etc. if you refer to them in your paper. There are specific reference list entry formats for each of these types of sources, and in just a minute, I'll show you a good website to look up for citing audiovisual information. All right, what if you need to cite media used in a visual presentation? For example, an image or video taken from the internet that you wish to use in a PowerPoint or a keynote. Kind of what I'm doing right now. If you're reproducing an image in your presentation, you need to follow these 3 steps in order to cite it correctly. You need to check the copyright license. Make sure the image is licensed for reuse under Creative Commons. You need to include the image URL on each unimage URL on each slide where the image appears in the presentation. If you look at the bottom left of this slide, you'll see an example. It's not very bright, and it doesn't have to be. It just has to be there. It's kind of like right along the base of the chalkboard. And you have to include a reference slide in APA style at the end of the presentation. Here's an example of a reference page for a visual presentation, and it's for this one. All right, now we're going to talk about how to find images. There are a few places to look for images that are licensed for reuse. I'm going to hop off of the keynote, and we're going to go over and we're going to look at them. CompFight is a good one. I'll send you this link in the chat so you can bookmark it if you'd like. There's lots of information here on CompFight to help you search. Frequently asked questions. You can learn about photo licenses, etc. That's a good one to use. And then the other place that you might want to go if you're looking for images is the library. If you go to the research databases and you look at AP image collection, you can use anything found here. Or we also have, depending on what you're looking for, we have access to Oxford Art Online. Both of these, the AP Images Online and Oxford Art Online, Full Sail has actually purchased licenses so that you may use these images. And you can search through both of these like you do the other databases. All right, back to Keynote. All right, so you're probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed by everything because APA does have a lot of specific rules. It's a lot to remember, but it's important to remember that you don't have to have a photographic memory to use APA. You just need to follow some simple tips and you'll be well on your way to citing sources properly. First, become familiar with the basic elements of an APA paper, which is what we just did in this session, excuse me. 2, pay attention to your instructor's requirements. Is APA required for the assignment? How many sources has your instructor asked for? Do you need to include an abstract? 3, you can always use the manual as a reference. The library has these available in like physical copies, or you can find great resources online through APA's site as well. Or you can refer to an online APA resource. I'm going to show you one of my favorites. I thought I had it up, but I do not. I love the Purdue OWL. This is a great site to use just in general. They have all kinds of writing tips. They have great grammar resources, but they also have a great APA resource. So if you come here, they have a very in-depth look at APA. I'm going to give you guys this link as well. This is extremely, extremely dense. However, if you are looking for a quick place to go, I can't recommend projectapa.info enough. I'm going to send you this link as well. Project APA Info was actually created by some Full Sail instructors, and they have a frequently asked questions page about APA. They have a sample APA paper format that takes you through step by step how to format your paper in APA. And then they have in-text citation examples and reference page examples. And I really like this one because they do the audiovisual media. And these are often things that you guys are citing that can be a little bit harder to find on other APA manuals. So this is a great one to use, especially if you have a source that you're having a hard time finding how to cite it. All right, and my fifth tip is always check to see that formatting, in-text citations, and reference list entries match examples that appear in the manual or online sources. After you've created your entries, go back and check to make sure they all match up. And when in doubt about a documentation issue, ask your course instructor or make an appointment with the Writing Center. We can always help. For more information about the Writing Center, visit the Writing Center website on Connect. I'm actually going to hop over there really quickly because I want to show you another thing that we have on Connect that makes it pretty great to use. All right, so if you come up here and you just type in Writing Center in your search bar, this is the Writing Center page. There's a lot of information here, but one thing that you can use is the online resources. We have all of the APA links that I just went over, plus a lot more here. We have grammar links, all kinds of good things that can be helpful to you guys. And we also have, under downloads, we have APA help. This is a visual guide. Again, you can download it and just have it whenever you need it. All right, so right now I'm going to open up the floor to questions. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box, or you can, raise your little hand and I'll unmute you. I see a question about, can we use the template on Word? I would say sometimes the templates on Word, I've actually never used it for APA. And the reason I've never used it is sometimes the templates on Word do not transfer well. So if you have to upload your document anywhere, sometimes it messes up in that uploading process. And also it can be a little bit hard. It can be just a little bit off. So I would say to steer clear of those, although if you're really stressing about it and that YouTube video that I posted earlier on in the conversation doesn't help, you can always do that. Okay, we have a question. What if you're referencing a video on YouTube or other sources? I would say let's go to that Project APA info, that website. It specifically shows how you do that. And here, I will pull that up. That is not what I meant to do. Okay, so projectapa.info. That's in-text citation. Sorry, guys. Audio, visual. Here it is. You have motion picture, music album, all of this good stuff. Online image with named creator. Online video, real name and screen name. You might not always have both of that. Online video, screen name only. But you need the last name followed by the initials. And if you have the screen name, you would put it in brackets. If you don't have the screen name, you just leave it out. Or if you have only the screen name, you would use it like the last name. And then in parentheses, you have the date that it was uploaded, the name of the video, and the fact that it's a video file. Then you have retrieved from, and you put the URL. But that's a really great one to use. We have a question about what about information you personally know? I think you mean how do you cite information that you personally know? That depends. If you think it's common knowledge doesn't have to be cited. But if it's the type of information that you know because maybe you know it because you're a scientist and it's a theory that you studied in your biology class, that's not common knowledge. That isn't common knowledge. You would need to find a source and cite it. Is EasyBib an acceptable site to use? I always tell people you can start with those citation machines. One of the issues that I have with EasyBib is the same thing with the word templates. Some of the time they are not 100% correct. So you can start with EasyBib or Citation Machine, but you need to check it yourself. So go to projectapa.info and actually look up an example of whatever you're citing to make sure that you've cited it in the same way, or that EasyBib has cited it in the same way. Okay, apastyle.org was a little bit confusing. Yeah, I agree. That site is extremely heavy and dense. I would say start with projectapa.info. And if you still can't find what you need there, then maybe go to one of the sites like Purdue OWL or Project AP or apastyle.org. So I'd say definitely give projectapa.info a try first. I find it a lot more helpful. Okay, somebody's saying Citation Machine might not be updated with Edition 6 rules. I think that's probably accurate. I don't know how often they update those sites. This is, again, why I'm telling you, it's fine to start with those citation making websites, but you need to actually check your own work. It's not their job to actually do this for you. All right, any other questions? All right, if anybody is feeling a little bit nervous about asking questions because I'm still recording, I'm going to turn the recording off now. And if you want to ask me a question once that's done, feel free to. I'm going to be in here for the next 5 minutes or so.